Turkey is under the strain of dissonant yet powerful political, strategic, and ideological forces that have caused convulsions in its political and social structure. It is being pulled in different geostrategic directions, being drawn by the strategic gravity of Russia away from the orbit of Nato. Its political medium is manifesting the imposition of Islamic sentiments deeply rooted in Inner Anatolia upon an avowedly secular Kemalist political structure. It is demonstrating the centralization of political authority and economic decision-making in a systemic arrangement that, over recent decades, has been ostensibly democratic, albeit under the Praetorian watch of the military leadership. It has seen the military intelligence deep state exposed and deconstructed piecemeal through judicial edict. It is reaching out through transnational neo-Ottomanism while experiencing a surge in nationalist sentiment at home. These divergent forces reveal the tectonic shifts that underlie the veneer of Kemalist secularism over the Turkish political medium. The current regional crises, particularly those in Iraq and Syria, have forced Turkey to examine itself and struggle to come to terms with its own ideological and strategic identity and space. This process is leading to an awakening that should not be confused for shallow nationalism. Rather, Turkey may be on the cusp of emerging as a major regional power. If it can resolve its internal struggle for ideological identity, it will assert its key strategic position between Europe and Asia, projecting its influence over a gathering Islamic identification from Central Asia to Africa, while expanding its economic, industrial, and technological engagement with an increasingly assertive Germany that is emerging once more onto the global level of power projection and influence. This is the larger context within which Turkey's removal from the US's F-35 fighter program and its testing relationship with NATO should be viewed. The current situation of Turkey's removal from the F-35 project is not a step towards Turkey's removal from NATO. NATO is nothing like the EU in terms of institutional rights and responsibilities and political and economic alignment from which there can be a political exit. NATO is a military alliance stemming from the principle of collective defense, not exclusively to deter Russia, but for the US to direct the military posture of allies in Eurasia to project power increasingly towards the Middle East and North Africa region. It is no secret that NATO gains the likelihood of having to carry out operations against Turkey at some stage, as demonstrated in November 2017 in Norway, when Turkey withdrew from NATO exercises after having been depicted as an enemy in one of the scenarios, drawing apologies from NATO. This was not the first time that NATO or its member states depicted Turkey as an enemy state. Despite such treatment, the strategic reality dictates that in fact NATO and particularly the US are eager to maintain Turkey within the alliance. Turkey's vital geostrategic location relative to Russia, Europe, the Middle East, and the Mediterranean, as well as its riparian position as the source of the headwaters of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, determine that Turkey is extremely important to have as a power allied to NATO, and certainly not an extension of Russian strategic power projection into the Mediterranean and the Middle East, where Russia has become militarily active since 2015. Fully aware of this, Turkey is becoming adamant that its role in NATO be on its own terms, not the US's, particularly in regards to Syria and the Rojava statelet, which the US backs directly. However, Turkey does not yet have the military capacity to act with such strategic audacity. More specifically, the US believes that Turkey should not have that capacity, which is the actual reasoning behind why the US took the decision to expel Turkey from the F-35 fighter program in order to deter it from acquiring the S-400 system. Hence, actions taken by Turkey reveal a developing potential to directly challenge the composition of the US strategic architecture in the region, represented by NATO and specifically its projection of air power in Syria and the wider Middle East. To this end, Aside from Turkey's obvious direct opposition to the YPG-led Rojava entity backed by the US, and aside from Turkey's increasing bilateral ties with Iran and Russia, Turkey has embarked upon a program of indigenous military-industrial development to ensure its capacity to remain self-sufficient of NATO's dependency military culture. For example, Turkey has developed the capacity to maintain and upgrade F-16s indigenously, and has done so for its own air force as well as for 41 fighter aircraft from Pakistan's aging F-16 fleet. Further, the Scientific and Technological Research Council of Turkey, TÜBİTAK, has embarked on a series of technology-driven defense programs, one of which has been able to develop and weaponize high-power lasers. TÜBİTAK has also developed an indigenous SOM or standoff missile, colloquially known as a cruise missile, with real-time retargeting and topography reading guidance. This is currently in production by Roketsan, which is the entity developing Turkey's space launch capacity. Admittedly, Turkey's declared ballistic missile capability is far behind its technical capability in other areas, or so it would seem. Turkey has developed the Han missile, which is based upon the Chinese M20 missile and has a range limited to 280 kilometers, with a targeting radius or circle of error probability of 30 to 50 meters, which is a relatively rudimentary technology. Being a signatory to the MTCR or Missile Technology Control Regime, Turkey is limited to developing missiles with a range of 300 kilometers or less. However, speculation is rife that Turkey's actual capability is far greater than what it has declared that it has tested. In fact, Turkey has established the Space Systems Integration and Test Center, or USET in its Turkish acronym, which aims to achieve the capability to develop and launch satellites into orbit. USET is to be integrated into the Space Group Command of the Turkish Air Force. Hence, Turkey is rapidly developing technological and military infrastructure which will see it being able to mount a realistic defense of Turkey without reliance on NATO, while enabling it to project military power into areas vital to its interests in the region. This is where the US vision for Turkey diverges from Turkey's own vision for itself, emanating from its ideological orientation, its historical experience, and its strategic compulsions. The US vision for Turkey as a pivotal regional state is to keep Turkey as a regional sub-power within a larger US defense architecture, able to furnish its geographical and infrastructural assets to the US and NATO, as in the case of the Incirlik Air Force Base. This base is considered by US Air Force personnel to be a US base, while Turkey considers it very much a Turkish facility used by the US with Turkish consent. This US vision sees an inward-looking Turkey facing insecurity on its southern border from Syria, on its western border from Greece, and from Russia in the north. This insecurity should compel Turkey to maintain a dependence upon NATO, from which it derives its security through collective defense. Turkey's own vision is comprehensively different. Whereas in previous decades, Turkey was apparently content with receiving US and NATO protection from the Soviet Union while accepting to have a minor role to play regionally. Recent US vulnerabilities in the region, combined with the US's posture in Syria, which has brought it into direct opposition to Turkey's vital strategic interests, underscores to Turkey that it will inevitably have to emerge from the strategic constraints of NATO and forge independent bilateral relations with Russia, with the EU and Germany in particular, and with each of the pivotal states in the Muslim world. The question for Turkey is how it can achieve this without succumbing to the direct imposition by the US to force Turkey to uphold the US's own strategic architecture in the region. I'm your host, Dr. Omar Khan. Thank you for joining me on Insight.